Hey there, guys. Jack Dallas here. I've been doing a lot of, obviously, I've had my last two videos on Bernie Sanders, and I feel like lately I've been trying to discuss more economic principles more frequently in my videos. And one of the things that kind of came up during the Bernie Sanders video was this concept of rights and what is a right and who should provide things which people determine to be rights. So I've drawn up a little outline here just to kind of keep me, within the realm of my relevant points here, but it's also more for your reference as I go along so that you can see what the crux of my argument is all along. Now, I've started here with just a straight up dictionary.com definition of a right. And of course, this is I guess, the most accurate and short definition that one could possibly come up with. A moral or legal entitlement to have or obtain something or to act in a certain way. I think that word entitlement is interesting because what we're really talking about here are essentially things which people can't live without. And it's this concept of if we have things which every human being needs, then how can we make sure that it's provided for everyone, and how can we make sure that you know it's not just the rich or it's not just the well off who are able to provide for themselves well. And I'm not just talking about being able to live a luxurious lifestyle by any standard. I'm talking about just being able to get health care, just being able to afford to see a doctor, uh, being able to afford grocery bills, those kinds of things. The basics is what I'm really trying to address here, guys. Now, the frequently cited examples, I guess I should add one here. I was really trying to keep this kind of short, but healthcare and education, guys. Obviously, some of the two most frequently cited examples of things that are quote unquote rights, especially when we're talking about Western Europe or Scandinavia or any other quote unquote socialist country. These are things which are usually, expressed as rights because they feel everyone should have them, and the government essentially provides them, quote unquote, for the people in these systems. Now, my argument to this is that I think that people who disagree with some of my principles, and I really mean these principles at large, I don't just mean, me alone. I didn't come up with a lot of these ideas uniquely on my own. Um, the main problem is that people who are more socialist minded people tend to think that because I don't think that the government should provide these things, and because I have the ideas that I've presented, they believe that what I'm essentially saying is that these things are not rights and that they shouldn't be provided for, and that essentially only the rich should have them because of that. Uh, my argument to that would be no. The fact that I advocate a different system in order to accomplish these things, in order to provide these things for society, does not mean that I don't want to provide them for society. It just means that I have my own ideas about them. And my argument here would be, are we really providing for society when, in order to equalize the playing field, we have to kind of, lower the bar for everyone? Um, I would kind of like to come up with a series of ideas, guys, in which the quote unquote equality of the Western European system, which I wouldn't really call equal, but let's just say conceptually equal, uh, that aspect would be combined with the quality of America. So, American quality of healthcare and American quality of education. Now, I can tell you without getting too personal, I can tell you from personal experience that I have had pretty bad run ins with both the American education system and the American healthcare system. Uh, that's really all I'm willing to say about that for now, but let me tell you guys, you would be hard pressed to find someone, especially my age, who is more fed up with both of these systems. So it's not as though I'm coming to the table to discuss this with you, uh, and coming from the perspective of someone who enjoys the American system. I don't. Um, but to simply suggest that if you are not someone who believes that providing things like healthcare and education, if you're someone who doesn't believe that these should be provided for in a socialist manner, that you simply don't believe they should be provided for, or that it somehow means that you think only the rich should have them, um, that is just simply inaccurate. I personally believe, and the reason that I advocate my system is because I believe it will provide more of these things for more people at a higher level. In other words, I believe we can provide health care for even more individuals that's at a high level without waits, without lapses in technology, and I think the innovation that will come along coupled with that from companies that are in the more R&D side of healthcare will be extremely high because of that. I think there's going to be a natural synergy to a more open market in healthcare. And that brings me to another point, guys. I guess I could say the same thing about education. I believe that we can educate everyone who wants to go to college, who chooses to go, without having to put them into endless amounts of debt, which I am in. So, yeah, before somebody here says, hey, maybe you're not a socialist because you weren't affected by these things. Oh, no, guys, I pay those bills every month. In fact, I pay 3 of those bills every month. So I know it pretty well. But what I will say is that I do think that there is definitely something to be said for a sacrifice in quality. Not that I'm saying that, for example, Western European healthcare is bad or that the education is bad, but to put it in a really simple manner, guys, just because I'm not trying to make this an hour-long video, but really nobody can tell me that the quality of either of those things is as high in Western Europe as it is in America. Likewise, it would be hard for an American to argue that these things are readily available, at least not without a detrimental cost to everyone in America. So both systems have big problems that I would like to address. Now, I think one of the largest misconceptions is that healthcare and education are already sort of in an open market system in America. Nothing could be further from the truth, guys. Everybody wants to come at me and talk about these comments where the doctors make so much more money in America and the healthcare costs are so much higher. Guys, I mean, I'm right there with you. I know. Trust me, I've done the research. I've done the reading. I'm well aware of all of those things. My statement to you is that if you take those observations and then say, well, this is just because we have a wide open free market and that's what happens when the doctors run the show. Not true, guys. There is far, far, far more government intervention into the system in the form of taxes, licensing, ridiculous insurance stuff that goes on because the American legal system is just so corrupted and just so wrought with absolute waste that it cripples everyone in the economy, not just those in the healthcare profession, but everyone. And I think healthcare, unfortunately, gets hit particularly hard by these high taxes and high regulations, because every time they have to comply with said regulation or things like that, it usually comes with an extremely high price tag in the form of licensing, in the form of legal fees, things like that. I think it's a little bit scary to be a doctor in America today. I mean, with malpractice and just the amount of money that you're paying to insurance alone, I think it's difficult. Now, at the same time, like I said, I had a bad experience with the American healthcare system, and I've seen how these people have a lot of leeway. But at the same time, I would argue that we could get a better, more competitive system that is more advantageous to the consumer, meaning the person needing the healthcare, in both ways. One, in terms of quality, but also in terms of cost. I think that by introducing competition into the marketplace, we will have these things. This is the biggest misconception, guys. I can really wrap it up with this statement. People think that the costs are a result of an open market, whereas an open market is in fact the remedy to what we have going on here. And it is this lack of competition and this lack of openness which has led to the high prices. I mean, think about it in any other industry, you guys. I mean, look at, computers. Of course, they're still expensive, but imagine buying a computer that was on the shelf, yesterday at, I don't know, some computer store, Best Buy, Apple Store, whatever. Imagine that computer being on the shelf even 3 years ago. Would it have cost more for the same equipment that's in it or less? Well, obviously it would have cost more. My question is, why does this not happen, this same effect with healthcare? Why is it that as technology becomes exponentially better, costs are rising? Something's missing here, guys, and I think that blaming the free market is kind of, well, first of all, it's inaccurate because we don't have a free market, and that's why when I hear that argument, I tend to just kind of I just kind of sigh for a little bit, guys, because it's hard for me to debate someone when their main points are just wildly inaccurate from the beginning. Like I said, I'm open to discussing healthcare and education with people because I don't like either current system, the more American or the more Western European one. So it's not like you're going to find me defending one or the other. I'm here to discuss the issue. But if we start this discussion by saying, well, the problem is the free market, I mean, that's like, you know, if you just try to blame, let's say we're talking about the California wildfires, and you said, well, why is that happening? And I said, well, because some crazy dragon breathed fire and caused a huge fire. Well, we can't really discuss why it's happening if we're just coming up with wildly inaccurate statements from the beginning. And I would suggest anybody who thinks we have a free and open market in healthcare, why not go on to the AMA website, American Medical Association, and take a look at what it takes to become a doctor in America, and get back to me after that. All right, guys? Moving on, this is sort of just something I'm going to try to keep short. I'm not trying to really make this an argument, guys. This is far more of just an observation. I was thinking about this topic so much that it occurred to me that people use this word rights, and it's things that everybody needs. My question is, what about things like food and water, like I said, that are not provided for by the government automatically, unless people are extremely poor? I mean, I realize, you have food stamps, you have, things like that. So it's not like I don't know that food stamps exist or something. But this is more just a quick observation. Like, okay, if healthcare is a right, if education is a right, and it should, quote unquote, be provided for by the government, by everyone, equal, whatever, taxes, that whole thing, that's interesting to me because, like I said, what about food and water, which I would argue are even more essential? Food and water are more essential to our lives than education, certainly. More essential than healthcare as well. I mean, obviously, a lack of healthcare will lead to your death too, but you'll die a lot more quickly from lack of food and water. I just find it interesting that when people on the left cling to these definitions like rights so tightly, maybe they're missing the boat a little bit, because there's some things that I would think meet their definition of a right far more accurately, which are still somewhat on an open market. Now, I think this has to do with the fact that countries probably realize that having a system in place like the old Soviet Union, where you basically just get, government provided food and government provided everything, just collapses and falls apart. So they know they need to have an element of the free market. Maybe they've decided that these things are the things which should be provided for on the market. I don't really know what their justification is, but I just find it interesting. It's just something that I thought I'd mention. Maybe you think it's a stupid point. I don't know. But when I hear people say, oh, you're wrong because healthcare is a right, I'm like, oh, what about food? I don't know. It's just something that I kind of find interesting. And it's even more interesting that if somebody is lacking in food, let's say that you live in Western Europe, you don't have enough food to eat, you apply for food stamps, you get the food stamps. Who is to determine what your needs are, and who is to determine what the needs of your family are? If something is a right, and it's a universal right to all human beings, then why does a small group of human beings decide how that right is then affected onto people? And at the same time, it goes both ways, because they're also choosing how to take those things away from others in order to provide for other people. And my last point here basically has to do with behavior. Now, I realize that this is where a lot of liberals get fired up, because if you start to suggest that any individual person who is poor got there by anything other than basically a rich person putting them there, or society, or racism, or all the other lame excuses out there, basically you get called a racist, because somehow we're supposed to believe that being born poor or rich is like being born with blonde or brown hair. It just happens. Like, one guy gets born and, he has a three-piece suit on and makes $1 million, and one guy gets born and he's poor. I don't know. It's not really how it works. Now, I realize there's a lot of environmental factors, And I realize that there's plenty of examples of, yeah, I mean, rich kids getting born and they're useless. I mean, like the Kardashians or something. And there's examples of poor people who are geniuses who are going to be held back because of their economic condition. I get that. I really, really do. But what I'm saying here, guys, is one, I think that the problem with welfare is it often rewards bad behavior, such as increasing payments for having more children. I realize you're going to need more money if you have more kids, but that's how we end up with welfare queens and welfare families. And go ahead and call me a racist for saying that. But guess what, guys? It's the truth. I mean, I observed it. I lived in an inner city, somewhat ghetto neighborhood the last 7 years of my life, and I watched it every day. So for all you people out there saying that that's racist or inaccurate, or oh, you must have heard that on Fox News, I mean, I don't know if you guys ever lived in those environments where I had neighbors of mine that were on the stoop when I left for work, and they were on the stoop when I got home, and they hadn't moved, and they were all perfectly capable of working. In fact, I had one neighbor one time ask me for advice on purposely how to get fired and still be able to get unemployment benefits in full and all this stuff. I mean, literally, he asked me how to do that, guys. I'm not making this up. So I'm not saying that this is a universal thing that all people that are poor because of their behavior, but there are a lot of people to whom that statement applies, and I think that socialism doesn't address an improvement in general behavior. I think if someone is deserving of part of the resources of all of society, that they need to sort of prove that they are going to correctly utilize those resources and in turn pay it forward back to society in order to, one, enhance the world for all of us, which is a socialist tenet, I believe, and in order to, number two, make it worth it and make it right for us. If we essentially lend you or give you some of our resources, it's really giving because we're not asking for anything back, not like an interest payment, then you should show us, demonstrate to us that you were able to do something with it and able to affect change. And think about it, guys. If these people are not able to do that, then we need to address why, because maybe we're not really helping them. And at the end of the day, isn't this what this is all about? So the crux of my argument is, guys, just because I don't think the government should provide these things doesn't mean I don't think people should have access to them. It just means I have different ideas. In fact, in my system, I believe these things would be provided for more people. So don't question my morals. I want to provide these things. I simply believe that my system will provide it more effectively and for far more people. So I think our passion is aligned, okay? I want you guys to realize that. I think that our motivation is aligned. We just need to discuss how we're going to get there, and we need to stop making up myths like the fact that we live in a free market, because we don't, and we need to stop using these myths to justify opinions that simply don't add up when you work out the numbers. Guys, we'll talk soon.